Hi, everybody. An update on what's going on here in the life of Mr. Moohead. Um, I have an abscess on tooth number 13. It blew up in the gums, and I'm going to probably have to have a tooth extraction next week. Isn't that groovy? In the interim, at least last night, the abscess drained, so I'm not in such horrible pain as I was prior to that. So I have a lot to look forward to. I wanted to take a minute just to comment on something. This is a short podcast, but I think there's a point to be made here. I'm calling this fake news and no news. You know, last night was, my abscess hadn't popped, hadn't drained yet. So I was in pain watching the Cavaliers predominantly, and then saving the Indians game on hold, in essence, recording it so I could watch the Indians game afterward. And then the way I watch the Indians, I can fast forward through some things, but I watch every second of the Cavaliers because it's the Boston Celtics and the Cavaliers. It's just the biggest fucking game in the NBA last night. That's all. And I woke up this morning after watching the game, the games, and lo and behold, hey, my abscess had drained, and it's like, oh, I'm feeling a little bit better. And so I immediately went to the internet to say, let's see what the reaction is after all of the buildup and the hype about the Celtics and the Cavaliers. And lo and behold, story 1 on ESPN, nothing. Number 2, nothing. Number 3, number 4, number 5. I'm halfway down the fucking page, and there's no mention whatsoever. You never know that the Cavaliers had even played the Boston Celtics. And at that point, I realized that LeBron James is absolutely right. It is still us against them. The press has never come to the realization that the Cavaliers are the champions of the NBA. And as remarkable as it sounds, after everybody saw it with their own eyes, beating the Golden State Warriors, coming back from a 3-1 deficit, nobody really wants to acknowledge the truth about this. So that's what I'm here to do. The Boston Celtics played like a bunch of scared mice. I'll bring in Tommy Heinsohn now to explain from the Boston perspective what happened last night. Here he is, Tommy Heinsohn. I don't know what you want me to say, Mr. Moohead. I mean, Bob Dole's penis shriveling up in a cold shower doesn't even begin to describe what happened to the Boston Celtics. If they think Isaiah Thomas is going to be able to carry this team every single night, somebody else has to stand up. Well, Jay Crowder looked like Danielle Marshall, hot buttered Donnie. I didn't know he was a member of the Mason Society, not the secret one, the bricklaying one. And Kelly Olynyk, and somebody tell Hubie Brown it's Olynyk. Everybody saw him play at Gonzaga. Everybody knows how to say his name. For Christ's sake, he ripped the shoulder socket wide open of Kevin Love. Everybody knows who Kelly Olynyk is. It's not Olynyk. Somebody please explain to that old fucker, not that I'm young, that's how you say his name. He's camped out behind the three-point line while the Celtics are getting out-rebounded by a Cavalier team that doesn't even have Tristan Thompson because he sprained his thumb fist-fucking Khloe Kardashian. I don't need to hear all the hype. I saw what happened last night, and I'm disturbed by it, and I just want to walk away, put my head in my hands, and just say, fuck shit, cunt ass bitch, motherfucking cocksucker cunt. Tommy Heinsohn out. So you see, Tommy Heinsohn is upset about it too, but I'll be a little bit more blunt and direct as far as what happened last night. Cavaliers wanted the game more. All this notion and talk of that was the Cavaliers' third game in 4 nights, and that the Celtics were working on 3 days rest. All of this means nothing when the rubber meets the road, and I keep saying come playoff time, you get an insight into how teams approach big games. And Cleveland has proven the ability to do that. And these Celtics, who are consistently first-round exiters in the playoffs, looked every bit the part. Now, I'm not going to bury the Boston Celtics and say they're never going to get by the first round, or they're not going to win the East, or they're not going to get to the finals. I'm not going to say that. But what I'm going to say is their roster looks shaky. The first thing I noticed is Channing Frye, who got 8 rebounds and 10 points. There's no way Channing Frye should be able to get 8 rebounds, not if Al Horford's doing his job. And the truth is they never made Channing Frye work hard on defense. From a strategic perspective, why they were not feeding the ball down low to Al Horford, who I think could beat Channing Frye like a drum, it's a mystery to me. Instead, they had the ball in the hands of Isaiah Thomas, which everyone expected, but the Cavaliers played him differently. Maybe it was just that they played like it mattered. Whatever the case, every time Isaiah Thomas tried to go to his left to get around the corner, there was another Cavalier waiting for him. And the help side defense rotated behind him so that any passes that he could throw went to people that the Cavaliers were willing to leave open. And there were open shots missed by Jay Crowder, by Jaylen Brown. These guys, and Avery Bradley was 1 of 8 from the field. Just a hideous performance. And you can say, well, anyone can have a bad night. But everyone? Not in a game where you're playing for first place in the division, and not in a game that is hyped, that is on national television. No way. They all failed. I mean, Isaiah Thomas was 9 for 19, but with the exception of that burst in the first quarter and the beginning of the second quarter, he was virtually invisible and clearly frustrated by the fact that he was in the tall trees, and it was almost like he was being sucked into a vortex. The Cavaliers had planned a proper defensive strategy to nullify him, or at least to make him work so hard to get what he got that it would tire him out. The other thing is the Celtics, who love to play off transition, didn't get an opportunity. And it's not that just that the Cavaliers shot okay, because they didn't shoot great. It's that the Cavaliers offensively rebounded without Tristan Thompson. They were fighting on the boards. And if you look at Kevin Love rebounding and Channing Frye getting rebounds, and then you look at LeBron James getting double-digit rebounds, everyone stepped up for everyone else. Kyrie Irving had a shitty shooting game. Kyrie didn't look like himself, but he was playing harder defense, which would explain why the shooting percentage drops. But he was also chasing around Isaiah Thomas into double teams and was playing much more disciplined defense. Meanwhile, the Cavaliers are just going to downplay the whole thing, because really, I guess that's what you expect from champions, is to live up to the moment and to play big when it counts. What I can't understand is why the national media has chosen to ignore this. And I knew it was going to happen watching the game, because I could hear the disenfranchisement of Hubie Brown, who really sounded like he lost his mother all over again during the broadcast. He was depressed. I mean, I've seen Hubie Brown do so many of these games, and I really don't like him. And I know he's revered because he's old, but fuck him. I think he's biased, and I think that he's past the point where he should call games. And what he says now is really predictable, but he sounded depressed about the fact that Boston couldn't get anything going offensively. How's about a little credit for the maligned Cleveland Cavalier defense? The entire pregame of the show on ESPN was dedicated to the failure of the Cleveland defense. And the entire pregame and early going of Hubie Brown was dedicated to showing vivid examples of how the Cavaliers' defense had failed. How's about a little accolade for the defense? But of course, you're not going to get accolades from people whose predispositions are to root for the other team. And look, I understand. The NBA wants somebody to step up. And the Celtics looked remarkably like the Raptors to me. You know, it was like watching Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan pedal as fast as hamsters to try to keep the rest of their team on the floor, but having major players disappear or finally just becoming frustrated. That's what we saw with Isaiah Thomas. By the end, he was just chucking up balls that were bad shots, and he was kind of flailing his arms, being upset, being very demonstratively upset. When he finally went to the bench, sitting there and shaking his head, it reminded me of Kyle Lowry and the Toronto Raptors, another team that loves to score off transition. The Celtics will play better in the future, and I'm sure that we caught them on an off night because they don't usually shoot that badly, but they're not a great shooting team either. But they do average 12 three-point shots made per game, and they were not even close to that. But what it's an illustration of is if you can cut off the head of the snake, you have the opportunity to put the load on guys and prove that they're there at the big moment. And I think of Patterson from the Raptors, who was a great three-point shooter from the field last year, but in the playoffs, it was Clank City. There are a lot of players who during the regular season can do one thing, but once the playoffs become a little more physical, the games count a little bit more. They go into the tank. And I wonder, seriously, you know, Jay Crowder's having a career three-point shooting year, but everything really looked kind of flat. And I know that he had suffered an elbow problem in the week prior to playing the Cavaliers. But if he wasn't healthy, they should have taken him off the floor. But it didn't look like anybody could shoot straight. Avery Bradley's shot were all line drives, all flat off the front rim. They didn't look good. And from a defensive perspective, they always look like they're playing hard, the Boston Celtics, but when push came to shove, the Cavaliers did something that they haven't done before against the Celtics. And the lack of Tristan Thompson's presence actually helped the Cavaliers last night because LeBron James, when the game got out of hand for the Celtics in the second quarter, scored his points in the paint. He backed his man down and played the pivot. He, in essence, was playing, and from an offensive perspective, the power four or even the five. He was also blocking shots like he was a five. This is, you know, and it's kind of a reversal, being able to put Channing Frye and swing him around to the perimeter along with Kevin Love and the other guys from the perimeter and Kyle Korver. But having LeBron down in the paint, he just manhandled him. And he scored all those points in succession in the second quarter that built up a 16, 17-point lead. And it's a lead that the Cavaliers would never relinquish. And LeBron had a big game, but the biggest reason he had a big game is because he did something that years ago he would never have done, because a lot of people said that at the time that LeBron James was contact averse and that he didn't like playing down in the paint. Well, things change as you get older, and maybe you can't do all the things that you did previously to get to the rack, but his strength is still undeniable, and he just beat up the man guarding him, and it didn't matter who they put on him. He finished, he drew fouls, he made his free throw shots, and the Celtics had no answer. And it never really got to the point where LeBron was passing from the inside out to find open three-point guys. He was just immediately catching the ball and going to the basket, which is something that I wish Kevin Love would do more, instead of just dribbling the ball and dribbling the ball and dribbling the ball. You get the ball, you make your move, you make a definitive move, you either attract a foul for the possible and one, or you put the ball up and try to score the basketball. LeBron was fantastic. That's the other thing. You know, you can, you know, I saw that Max Kellerman on ESPN was saying that the Cavaliers blew it by keeping LeBron in till virtually the end of the game with 4 minutes left. Fuck Max Kellerman. Max Kellerman's punch drunk from watching too many goddamn fights. The fact of the matter is the Cavaliers quietly made a statement, and they're not going to boast about it after the fact. But they came out, they played a physical basketball game, a complete basketball game. They played a defensive and offensive game. They got their share of points from a lot of different sources. Kyle Korver was making threes. Kevin Love had success in the game. LeBron, huge success. And even without Kyrie having the biggest game of his career by a long shot, the Cavaliers were able to get something out of virtually everybody who played on the floor and gave minutes. Even RJ knocked down a couple threes and a couple dunks. So, you can take your pick of fake news or no news. It's all controlled, folks. And if you want the truth, come here, because I will tell you what the truth is. And had the Cavaliers run down and just run out of gas or shown the same laissez-faire, I don't give a shit attitude, I would be harping on that this afternoon as opposed to what I have been saying. But overall, I've never heard the Boston Garden quiet like that and people just kind of streaming out. It was like, oh, fuck. It's like, this is like the worst thing that could have happened to us. It's like, God, we got our hopes up that we're the next NBA champions, or at least going to get into the finals. And this is kind of like, wow, can we really play with the big boys? And, look, if the Cavaliers and the Celtics play, it would have to be in the final round, of the East. And one of those teams probably not going to make it, based on some of the performances this year. So, and remember, the Cavaliers beat up the Magic by 22, and the Celtics barely hung on to beat that same Orlando team in Boston. So you never know when the wheels start coming off. This is an ebb and flow 82-game season, and it's who ends up hot and gets hot into the playoffs that counts most. I say it over and over again. We'll see. Boston has to play again tonight against Atlanta. We follow up by playing against Atlanta as well. So we'll see how they handle their back-to-back tonight and see if they have a hangover from this, because, something bad can turn into something worse if you allow it to. Now, the Cleveland Indians, before I get out of here, we talk about guys who are driven to be great. There are some guys like Manny Ramirez who are just talented as all get out. And they never really seem to work at anything because Manny's just Manny. And then there are other guys who you just really revere because they work so hard. A guy like Michael Brantley. Michael Brantley's a guy who didn't come in with all the fanfare that a Manny Ramirez came into the league with, but he worked at it. He worked at his craft. He became a good left fielder with a good accurate arm and that sweet swing. And you give him all the credit in the world. He's coming back from that shoulder injury. And there's a guy who just works hard. And there are other guys who are like that, who they just get the most out of what they're given. And then there's the frightening guys who are given a lot and work their ass off. And now that takes us to Francisco Lindor. Lindor makes what some people were saying was a boneheaded play. I've looked at the play, and I think that, on that ground ball, he thought he was going to toss the ball to Ramirez. Ramirez didn't get back to the bag. I don't blame Frankie for that play, but it surely hurt the Indians because they should have been out of an inning, and instead it allowed for important runs to score. And why Encarnacion was not expecting a throw to first base is another issue. I thought Lindor did the best he could under the circumstances, but he was late getting to second because he started to toss the ball and nobody was there. But at any rate, great players take responsibility for their miscues. And the very next inning, he whacks one in the left field stands for a home run to get us back into the game. At that point, to within one, we fall behind by 2 again. And then with the game on the line, he hits the grand slam that wins the game for the Indians. And as you see him rounding the bases, suddenly this isn't the sunny, smiling Francisco Lindor that we saw last year. The drive and the determination and the push in that player became evident as he rounded the bases, the fact that he was angry with himself for making what could have been a losing play for his team, and the ability that he summoned will to do something bigger and better. How exciting is that? A tremendous effort, 3-hit game for Lindor when he got off to not having any hits in his first 2 games. Now we see the Frankie we saw last year. Again, the clutch hitting of Jose Ramirez. I don't think these things were accidents last year. Ramirez is a guy who's a good contact hitter. He gets his bat on the ball. Yandy Diaz with 2 hits. The ball jumps off his bat. He's not a big power hitter, but you see how quickly the ball gets through the infield because, again, bat speed and the ball coming off the bat is more accelerated. He's a good hitter. Salazar, we shrug our shoulders because he can look great one minute and just look so ordinary and wild the next. But enough to get the job done. The Cleveland Indians are a better offense this year than they were last year. And it's not just because we have Michael Brantley, because he wasn't playing last night. It's just that we're getting more input from guys outside of 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5. We're getting production from 6, 7, 8, and 9. We're getting some good function out of guys like Almonte and Geyer and Diaz. We're getting guys on base who are populating the bases for those other hitters that we know we can count on. And we're doing this without Jason Kipnis, who I think is rapidly going to become an afterthought, because in my mind, Jason Kipnis is a guy who came up to the big leagues with that drive and desire, but when he had a couple of good seasons, he lost it. I think he gained too much weight, and he's been injury prone pretty much ever since. Had a good comeback year last year. He's injured again, but I question Jason Kipnis's fierceness and tenacity compared to somebody like Francisco Lindor or Jose Ramirez. And you look at those guys and you see it etched in their face how serious they are about getting the job done. 3-0 for the Cleveland Indians, first time, what they say, in 19 years. It's a 162-game season. Let's not get too excited. But the bottom line is that the Indians are scoring runs. They're getting timely hits and from many different sources. And a lot can go wrong. Nothing's really much been hit at Yandy Diaz, so we don't know whether he can field the ball or not. We'll see as the season progresses, but he sure looks good at the plate, and he does look like a polished young hitter. And we'll see how our pitching staff holds up, once we get into the Tomlins. And, we have a night off tonight. Then we're going to Arizona to play the Diamondbacks out there. So overall, it was quite a night, but, to read about it, you'd never know. To go on the national sites, you'd never know. And I guess that's why I'm here to shout from the highest mountains when the Cavaliers don't give a shit, and when the Cavaliers play lousy basketball, and when another team falls short of its mission. And we're going to find out everything we need to know about the Boston Celtics in the next 4 games, because you're going to see whether and I think they will come back tougher. I do, because I think they have a coach that will not let them lay down and die. I thought it was interesting early in the game that Stevens looked his players in the eyes that, we're going to chip away at this lead, he goes, we have a choice. We can do 1 or 2 things. The mics picked this up. He said, we can just lay down and die, which we're currently doing, or we can chip away at this lead and get back. Well, his team laid down and died. They looked at LeBron like he was a basketball god, and they died. They fell at his feet. Now they have to get up and fight back, just like the Cavaliers have been playing lousy, lackluster basketball and had to get back up on their feet and summon the will. 3 games in 4 nights. You have to summon the will sometimes and pull that out of yourselves. Let's see if the Celtics can do it. Thanks a lot for tuning in. I'm glad I was able to get this thing done. We'll talk to you live maybe Friday, depending on that. Until later, have a good day, everybody.